They thought humans were the weakest link in the galaxy. But beneath diplomacy and smiles, something else had evolved. Something sharper, smarter, unforgiving. The price of presumption. Talon Drevar stood motionless before the sprawling viewport of Nova Centauri Station, his copper-scaled hands clasped behind his back. The endless void of space stretched before him, punctuated by the occasional transport vessels scurrying between the station's massive docking arms, like insects around a luminous hive. Pathetic, he muttered, watching the human diplomatic shuttle make its ungraceful approach. The vessel wobbled slightly as it compensated for the station's gravitational field. 300 years of space flight, SS, and they still move like hatchlings learning to walk. His neural implant chirped softly, projecting the mission brief across his field of vision for the 100th time. The target data scrolled past in neat, geometric script. Lyra Voss, Chief Diplomatic Officer, Earth Coalition. Age 43 standard years. Security rating minimal. Threat assessment negligible. Talon allowed himself a small smile, revealing the edges of sharp, metallic teeth. The Vraxian High Command had chosen him for this mission, specifically because of the humans' perceived weakness. Their fragile bodies, their emotional instability, their laughably short lifespans. All of it made them perfect prey. Station control to incoming vessel DC-117. Please adjust your approach vector by 0.3 degrees. A bored voice crackled over the public communications channel. You're drifting off the optimal path again. Talon snorted. Even their best-trained pilots couldn't maintain a straight line. This assignment was beneath him, really. 15 years as the Vraxian Empire's most accomplished operative, reduced to eliminating a soft-skinned diplomat who probably couldn't even survive a standard decompression sequence. The mission parameters flashed again in his vision. Eliminate target. Make it appear natural. Maintain plausible deniability. Preserve diplomatic relations while sending a message. Message received. Control. Adjusting course now. The shuttle pilot responded, their voice carrying that infuriating human lilt that always sounded like they were on the verge of laughter. How they managed to achieve anything with such a casual approach to existence remained a mystery to him. Talon turned away from the viewport, his ceremonial robe sweeping silently across the polished floor. The station's artificial lighting gleamed off his scales, creating an intimidating aurora of colors that caused several passing humans to give him a wide berth. Their fear amused him. If they only knew what he was capable of, they would do more than simply step aside. His quarters awaited 3 levels down, carefully positioned with a clear line of sight to the diplomatic offices. Everything was prepared. The tools were in place, the contingencies were set. Soon, Lyra Voss would suffer an unfortunate accident, and the humans would learn their place in the galactic hierarchy. Let the hunt begin, Talon whispered, stepping into the gravity lift. As he descended, he reviewed his extensive collection of toxins and devices, each one specifically chosen to appear natural when used against human physiology. This would be simple, clean, and most importantly, untraceable. What Talon Navar didn't know. Soon enough, he would learn exactly why making assumptions about humans was the deadliest mistake in the galaxy. From his carefully chosen observation point in the station's central garden, Talon watched Lyra Voss move through her daily routine. The human diplomat sat at her usual table, sipping from a steaming cup of that bitter stimulant they called coffee. While reviewing reports on her data pad, subject maintains consistent patterns, he subvocalized, recording his observations. 07 o'clock hours, breakfast in the public garden. Here 800 hours, first diplomatic meeting. Shows no signs of enhanced security awareness. He adjusted his ceremonial robes, perfectly playing the part of a Vraxian cultural attaché, enjoying the artificial sunlight. The garden's observation spot offered an ideal vantage point. Carefully cultivated plants from 100 worlds created natural privacy screens, and the constant background hum of the hydroponic systems masked any whispered conversations. Voss set down her cup and smiled at a passing Centaurian delegation. The ease with which she interacted with other species both puzzled and irritated Tylon. In the 20 years since humans had stumbled onto the galactic stage, they had somehow wormed their way into every major diplomatic initiative. Their inexperience should have relegated them to the outer rim, he muttered. Instead, they broker peace treaties between species that have warred for millennia. His neural implant projected the morning's intelligence update. Another human-mediated agreement had just prevented a resource war in the Carina sector. The Vraxian High Command was getting nervous. Humanity's diplomatic influence grew daily, threatening centuries of carefully maintained power balances. Talon's attention snapped back to his target as she stood to greet someone. A towering Drachnid ambassador approached her table, mandibles clicking in what passed for a smile among their kind. Voss showed no sign of discomfort at meeting a being that could tear her apart in seconds. "Please, Ambassador Korvik," she said, gesturing to the empty chair. "Join me. I was just reviewing your proposal for the mining rights distribution." Talon leaned forward slightly, his audio enhancers picking up their conversation. This was unexpected. The Drachnid negotiations weren't supposed to begin for another week. "Your modifications to the agreement are surprisingly equitable." The ambassador's translator rendered his clicks and whistles into standard speech. "My queens are pleased," Voss's laugh carried across the garden. "The secret is simple, Ambassador. We looked for ways everyone could win, rather than focusing on who deserves to lose." Talon barely contained his sneer. Typical human naivety. Yet somehow, the mining rights dispute that had claimed thousands of lives over 3 centuries appeared to be reaching a peaceful resolution. Time to begin phase 1 of his plan. He stood smoothly, making his way toward the garden's environmental control panel. A simple override command, transmitted from his neural implant, would trigger the sprinkler system. The water would be harmless, but the chaos would let him observe Voss's reactions under stress. The command transmitted. Nothing happened. Talon frowned, sending the override again. The panel remained stubbornly inactive. "Excuse me." A gentle voice spoke from behind him. "Are you having trouble with the environmental controls?" He turned to find Lyra Voss herself standing there, coffee cup still in hand, head tilted slightly to one side. "The system can be temperamental," she continued pleasantly, "but unauthorized access attempts are automatically logged to station security. I'm sure you wouldn't want to cause any diplomatic incidents. Cultural attack." "Enevar," he supplied smoothly, scales rippling in what he hoped passed for embarrassment. "My apologies. I was merely admiring the technological integration of the gardens." "Of course," Voss smiled, but her eyes remained sharp. "Please, enjoy your visit, Attaché Enevar. Oh, and do try the Terran roses. They're quite hardy, almost impossible to kill, actually." She walked away, leaving Talon to contemplate his first miscalculation. Perhaps this assignment wouldn't be quite as simple as he had imagined. The shuttle's maintenance access panel yielded easily to Talon's touch. The service corridor was deserted at this hour, just as his research had indicated. Humans were so predictable in their routines, always taking their rest cycles at the same time. He worked quickly, copper-scaled fingers dancing across the shuttle's navigation controls. A simple malfunction, he whispered to himself, carefully modifying the guidance systems. A tragic accident during a routine transit to the orbital diplomatic conference. The modifications complete, he sealed the panel and stepped back to admire his work. In 6 hours, Diplomat Voss would board this shuttle for her scheduled meeting with the Galactic Council. At precisely the right moment, the navigation systems would fail. The shuttle would spin out of control, and in the ensuing chaos, the life support systems would mysteriously shut down. Crix's neural implant chirped softly, warning him of approaching footsteps. He melted into the shadows, enhanced vision tracking the approaching maintenance worker. Another late night. "Hey, buddy." The worker patted the shuttle's hull, speaking to someone Crix couldn't see. "Someone's got to keep these birds flying, Tom," a voice responded from inside the shuttle. "Besides, ever since that incident in the Proxima sector, the boss lady insists on double checks for all diplomatic vessels." Crix froze. This deviation from routine was unexpected. "Yeah, heard about that. Whole fleet's been upgrading security protocols. Boss lady sure knows her stuff. Found 3 different sabotage attempts last month alone." The assassin's scales rippled with irritation. Why hadn't this additional security measure been in his intelligence briefing? 6 hours later, Crix watched from the observation deck as Voss's shuttle departed. He allowed himself a small smile, anticipating the coming chaos. The shuttle cleared the station's protective field, engines glowing bright against the void. Then something went wrong, but not in the way he had planned. Instead of the navigation systems failing catastrophically, the shuttle simply paused. Emergency lights blinked on, and a calm voice echoed through the station's communication channels. "Control, this is Diplomatic Shuttle 7. We're detecting some unusual readings in our nav system, initiating emergency protocols and switching to manual backup. Please clear a return vector." Crix's claws dug into his palms. Manual backup. That system hadn't been in the shuttle's specifications. His neural implant flashed warning symbols as his blood pressure spiked. The shuttle executed a perfect manual return, touching down with precision that should have been impossible without computer assistance. The boarding ramp extended, and Lyra Voss emerged, looking completely unruffled. "Remarkable timing," she announced to the gathered emergency response team. "We had just finished installing the new manual override systems yesterday. Looks like they work perfectly." "Good call on those upgrades, boss lady," Tom called from the maintenance crew. "Want us to check the nav system?" "Please do. And copy all logs to station security." Voss's eyes swept the observation deck, lingering for just a moment on Crix's position. We wouldn't want anyone to miss their council meetings due to equipment malfunctions. Crix watched her walk away, scales now rippling with barely contained fury. The humans had anticipated and countered his strategy before he even implemented it. How? Their technological capabilities weren't supposed to be this advanced. Their security protocols weren't supposed to be this thorough. His neural implant pinged again, this time with a message from his handler's mission timeline extended. New intelligence suggests target has enhanced security awareness. Revise approach. Enhanced security awareness, Crix snarled under his breath. The target is a diplomat, not a security operative. He stormed away from the observation deck, mind racing through possible alternatives. The toxins in his arsenal would be useless if she had similar countermeasures in place. Direct confrontation was out of the question. He needed something subtle, something she couldn't possibly anticipate. As he rounded a corner, he nearly collided with a young human child who was chasing some sort of hovering toy. "Sorry, mister," the child called out, darting past him. Crix watched the child disappear down the corridor, a new plan forming in his mind. Humans had one glaring weakness that no amount of security could overcome: their empathy, their need to protect others, especially their young. Perhaps it was time to create a situation that would force Diplomat Voss to choose between her safety and her species' infamous compassion. What Crix failed to realize, as he began plotting his next attempt, was that human empathy wasn't the weakness he assumed it to be. In fact, he was about to learn just how dangerous humans could be when they had something to protect. Station Security Chief Rendar slammed his robotic fist onto the desk, causing holographic reports to flicker. 3 security breaches in 2 days, all targeting the diplomatic sector. This stops now. "Sir," a junior officer reported, "we found unusual energy signatures near the primary school section. Matches the profile of Vraxian cloaking tech." Rendar's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the data stream. "Alert Director Voss. Tell her Operation ShadowNet is active." Across the station, Crix moved silently through the school sector's ventilation system. His scaled body barely fit in the cramped space, but desperation had forced this crude approach. The children would be arriving for their education cycle soon. One small crisis, a few scared younglings, and Voss would come running. His neural implant suddenly screamed with warnings. Security scans everywhere. The entire ventilation system was alive with detection pulses. "Impossible," he hissed. These were classified Vraxian scanning frequencies. The humans couldn't possibly. "Attention, unauthorized visitor." Lyra Voss's voice echoed through the vents, somehow sounding both professional and darkly amused. "The station's environmental systems will begin emergency sterilization in 30 seconds. While harmless to humans, the process is particularly uncomfortable for Vraxian physiology. I suggest you exit at the nearest junction." Crix burst from the vent, landing in a maintenance corridor. Alarms blared. Blast doors began sealing sections of the station. "Security teams converging on Section 7. A calm voice announced. "Please evacuate all non-essential personnel." He ran. His ceremonial robes discarded, Crix moved with the full speed and agility of a trained assassin. Down one corridor, through a closing blast door, up a gravity lift shaft. "Target moving to level 5, someone called out. "Teams redirect to intercept." A security squad appeared ahead. Crix smiled, finally in his element. He dropped into a combat stance, ready to demonstrate why Vraxian operatives were feared across the galaxy. The squad leader raised her weapon. "Sir, please remain still for decontamination." Decontamination. The realization hit too late. A fine mist sprayed from ceiling vents. Crix's scales began to itch unbearably. His superior Vraxian nervous system, usually an advantage, now worked against him as every scale felt like it was on fire. "Fascinating reaction." Voss's voice came from hidden speakers. "Our xenobiologists suggested this might happen. Thank you for confirming their hypothesis." Crix staggered away from the spray, dignity forgotten. He burst through a door into the station's massive hydroponics bay. Rows of crops stretched in every direction, feeding the station's population. Perfect. He could lose them in the... "Got him," a gruff voice called out. Security Chief Rendar stepped from behind a hydroponic tower, his cybernetic arm transforming into a riot control device. "Though, I believe the director would like a word first." "Indeed I would." Lyra Voss emerged from the opposite direction, now wearing a sleek combat suit instead of her diplomatic robes. Gone was any trace of the simple diplomat. Her movements were precise, practiced, dangerous. "What are you?" Crix demanded, fighting the burning sensation in his scales. "Exactly what I appear to be," Voss replied. "A diplomat, one who believes in peace through understanding, including understanding how to deal with threats to that peace." More security teams appeared, boxing him in. Crix noticed something odd about their weapons, their uniforms. This wasn't standard station security. "You're Federation Black Ops," he said with dawning horror. "This entire station is a training facility?" Voss smiled. "Not exactly. More like a filtering system. We find those who truly want peace, and we identify those who would threaten it. Your handlers suspected we had enhanced security. They had no idea that every diplomatic station in human space doubles as a counterintelligence hub." Crix heard movement in the hydroponics above him. More operatives, all with clean shots if he moved. The burning in his scales intensified. "The various species that visit here see what they expect," Rendar rumbled. "Naive humans playing at galactic politics. It makes our job much easier when people underestimate us." "Now then," Voss stepped forward. "Shall we discuss who sent you? Or would you prefer another dose of the scale irritant? Our xenobiologists have several formulas they're eager to test." Crix looked at the human diplomat who had outmaneuvered him at every turn. She stood relaxed, but ready, surrounded by an elite security force that had been invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. He had come to send a message about human weakness. Instead, he had walked into a trap 3 layers deep, sprung by masters of deception who wore their supposed naivety like a shield. "The Vraxian High Command," he said finally, "will not be pleased about this." On the contrary, Voss's smile widened slightly. "They'll be quite pleased to learn how effectively their operative tested our security systems. After all, that was your real mission, wasn't it?" Crix's neural implant pinged one final time. "Mission assessment complete. Proceed to diplomatic debrief." The pieces clicked into place. He had been sent to test the humans' defenses, yes, but he had also been tested. His own prejudices and assumptions had blinded him to the truth. The real game, it seemed, was far deeper than he had imagined. The interrogation room in Nova Centauri's secure sector hummed with tension. Crix sat rigidly in a chair that had been specifically designed to accommodate Vraxian physiology, making it impossible to claim discomfort as an excuse for his unease. Across the table, Lyra Voss reviewed a holographic display of his mission logs, occasionally making notes on her data pad. 17 years of successful operations, she said without looking up, specializing in political destabilization through targeted elimination. Your record is impressive, Avar, though I notice a pattern in your target selection. Do enlighten me, Crix replied, fighting to maintain his diplomatic facade despite his still-burning scales, since you seem to have such insight into my work. Voss turned off the holographic display. You consistently target species you consider inferior. Your mission success rate drops significantly when dealing with targets from, shall we say, more established civilizations. You dare question my abilities? Crix's scales rippled with indignation. I have eliminated threats that would make your primitive mind collapse in terror. And yet, here you sit. She gestured to the room around them, outmaneuvered by primitives. Tell me, does that burn more than the decontamination spray? Security Chief Rendar stood in the corner, his cybernetic eye tracking every micro-movement of Crix's scales. The assassin had already noticed how the chief's positioning gave him multiple angles of engagement, These humans were far more tactically aware than any report had suggested. "The High Command will not tolerate this treatment of their operative," Crix declared, attempting to regain some control of the situation. Voss laughed. The sound echoed off the walls, genuine amusement rather than diplomatic courtesy. "The High Command? You mean the same High Command that authorized this entire operation? Let me show you something interesting." She activated a new holographic display. This one showed a series of communications between Vraxian High Command and the human diplomatic corps. "No," Crix whispered, his perfect composure cracking. "Joint operation protocols signed 3 months ago," Voss explained. "Your mission wasn't to eliminate me. It was to test our security response while we evaluated your adaptability, though I must say your performance has been rather disappointing." The assassin's mind raced. "You're lying. This is human deception," says the operative who tried to sabotage a shuttle that had already been deliberately compromised. Rendar rumbled from his corner. "We knew about the assassination order before you did. The real one, not this evaluation exercise." Voss's expression shifted, becoming harder. "Someone in your government's lower echelons decided to turn a training operation into a real assassination attempt. They gave you secondary mission parameters, didn't they? Orders that came through unofficial channels." Crix remained silent, but his scales betrayed his shock with a ripple of pale copper. "You see," Voss continued, standing to pace the room, "humans have a particular talent that many species overlook. We recognize patterns, like how certain members of the Vraxian military have been pushing for a more aggressive stance against Earth. How convenient it would be if a diplomat died during a routine security exercise. The High Command would never. The High Command didn't." She cut him off. "But Commander Zurek's separatist faction thought they saw an opportunity. You were supposed to be their perfect weapon, the most skilled operative driven by genuine belief in human inferiority, working under the cover of an authorized exercise." The room felt smaller suddenly. Crix's neural implant remained stubbornly silent, no backup protocols activating. "We've already detained Commander Zurek's agents on 3 other diplomatic stations," Rendar added. "Your mission was the last piece of evidence we needed." "Why tell me this?" Crix demanded. "If what you say is true, why reveal your knowledge?" Voss sat back down, leaning forward slightly. "Because you're not the only one sending a message. Right now, every separatist agent in human space is discovering that their carefully laid plans were compromised from the start. The High Command learns that their internal security was breached. And you, Navarre, you learn the price of underestimating humanity. You played your role perfectly," she continued. "The arrogant assassin, so convinced of human weakness that you never questioned why everything went wrong in exactly the right way to expose the conspiracy." Talon's training warred with his growing realization. He had been chosen for this mission because of his prejudices. His very conviction in human inferiority had made him the perfect tool. "What happens now?" he asked, professional dignity warring with wounded pride. Now you have a choice." Voss's tone shifted, becoming almost sympathetic. "The High Command values competence, Navarre. They'll want to know how humans detected their security breach. Who better to explain our capabilities than someone who experienced them firsthand? You want me to work with humans?" The words tasted bitter. "I want you to evolve, like we did. Humanity survived countless wars, disasters, and challenges because we learned to adapt, to recognize when our assumptions were wrong. Can you do the same?" The question hung in the air between them. Talon looked at the human diplomat who had orchestrated his complete tactical and psychological defeat. He saw no gloating in her eyes, no triumph, only patience, and perhaps a hint of hope. In 17 years of wet work, he had never felt so thoroughly outclassed, and yet beneath his wounded pride, he felt something unexpected, curiosity. Perhaps, he said finally, scales settling into a more neutral pattern, I could benefit from studying human tactical doctrine. Excellent, Voss smiled, and this time, Talon recognized it as genuine. Shall we begin with how I knew you were in the ventilation system before you did? Nova Centauri's diplomatic conference room offered a stunning view of nearby star systems, but Talon barely noticed the stellar display. He stood before the assembled Vraxian High Command representatives, his formal report complete, awaiting their response. Let us be certain we understand. First Speaker Xanthor leaned forward, facial scales shimmering with barely contained anger. Commander Zurek not only attempted to transform a sanctioned training operation into an assassination, but did so in a way that would have exposed our entire intelligence network. Correct, First Speaker Talon confirmed. The humans detected the secondary mission parameters almost immediately. Their counterintelligence capabilities far exceed our previous assessments. And you, our most accomplished operative, never suspected you were being manipulated, Second Speaker Kalith asked, mandibles clicking in agitation. Director Voss, Elena stepped forward from where she had been quietly observing. Perhaps you could explain the human perspective on this situation. Of course, Zah. She activated a holographic display showing a complex web of connections. When we first detected the separatist movement within Vraxian space, we recognized a pattern. Commander Zurek's faction consistently deployed operatives who showed strong prejudice against younger spacefaring races. The display shifted, showing mission statistics. These operatives succeeded in operations against newer civilizations, but routinely failed against established powers. This created a feedback loop, reinforcing their belief in their superiority while blinding them to their tactical weaknesses. Talon's scales rippled as understanding dawned. You used our own prejudices as a weapon against us. We used your expectations to our advantage, Voss corrected gently, just as your people have done with other species for centuries. The difference is, we studied how you think. While you were dismissing us as primitive, we were learning your patterns, your cultural blind spots, your tactical doctrines. First Speaker Xanthor's scales shifted to a deep blue of respectful acknowledgement. You turned our most effective psychological warfare methodology against its creators. Remarkable. Humans, Voss continued, have a saying. The most dangerous opponent is the one you underestimate. Commander Zurek's faction saw us as simple, emotional, and weak. They never considered that our emotional intelligence might make us better at detecting deception, that our adaptability might be more valuable than rigid, tactical doctrine. The holographic display updated again, showing the full scope of the operation. Dozens of separatist plots exposed, hundreds of compromised agents identified, all while the targets remained unaware they were being monitored. Your operation has quite possibly prevented a civil war, Second Speaker Kalith acknowledged, though it pains me to admit how thoroughly we were outmaneuvered by a species we considered beneath us. That perception was our greatest advantage. Voss smiled. And now, it can be our greatest opportunity. Humanity doesn't want to dominate or compete. We want to collaborate, to learn from species who have navigated the challenges we're just beginning to face. Talon listened, seeing his own recent experiences reflected in the High Command's reactions. The same journey from dismissal to respect, from arrogance to understanding. The High Command proposes a joint security initiative, first speaker Xanthor declared. Operative Nevar, your new assignment is to work directly with Director Voss's team. Help us understand how our own prejudices nearly led us to catastrophe. And perhaps, Voss added, learn why humans consider our greatest weakness to be our greatest strength. The assembled leaders continued their discussion, but Talon's attention remained on the holographic display. He saw now what he had missed before. The humans hadn't just outmaneuvered him. They had done something far more impressive. They had turned his failure into an opportunity for both species to grow. His neural implant chirped with a new mission brief. The parameters were unlike anything he had seen before. Objective, foster understanding. Methodology, open exchange of tactics and culture. Success criteria, mutual growth. Ready to begin your real training? Voss asked quietly. Talon straightened, scales settling into a pattern of determined acceptance. I believe, Director, I finally am. 1 year later, Talon Drevar stood at his familiar spot before the viewport of Nova Centauri Station, watching the steady stream of vessels arriving for the first Galactic Security Summit. His scales now bore the distinctive silver markings of a Joint Operations Commander, a position created specifically for the new era of human-Vraxian cooperation. Quite a change from your last observation session here, Lyra Voss remarked, joining him at the viewport. She now served as Secretary of Interspecies Defense, though she insisted on maintaining her diplomatic role. Indeed, Talon agreed, watching a Drachnid warship dock alongside a human cruiser. The Separatists never imagined their failed plot would lead to the largest unified defense initiative in galactic history. Someone once told me that humans had a weakness for turning enemies into allies. Voss smiled, though I don't think they meant it as a compliment at the time. One Talon's scales rippled with amusement. That naive human diplomat proved quite dangerous. That arrogant Vraxian assassin proved quite teachable, she countered. Their comfortable banter was interrupted by a priority alert on both their neural interfaces, a new situation requiring their unique, combined approach to problem-solving. Speaking of teachable moments, Voss activated the classified briefing. It seems the Arcturian hegemony has decided to test humanity's defenses. They just dispatched their most accomplished infiltration team. Let me guess. Talon's scales shifted to a pattern of anticipation. They believe their technological superiority makes them invulnerable to primitive human countermeasures. Naturally, their operative's psychological profile suggests a particular disdain for younger species. They shared a knowing look. The trap was already set, the pieces in motion. Another would-be conqueror would soon learn the cost of underestimating humanity. You know, Talon mused, watching the Arcturian ship approach the station, its crew unaware they were already part of a carefully choreographed dance. I never did ask. That day in the garden, with the environmental controls, you knew I would try something predictable, didn't you? Actually, Voss's eyes twinkled with mischief. We had 30 different countermeasures prepared. You just happened to choose the one that would teach the most effective lesson. Talon laughed, the sound still strange to his own ears. Humans truly are the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Oh no, Commander Nevar, Voss replied, turning to head toward the security center. We're something far more dangerous than predators. And what is that, Secretary Voss? We're teachers, she called back. Now come on, we have some new students arriving.